He'll come early on Friday to set the table. Right, Audrey, my mom asked over the phone, sounding brisk and determined. I pressed the phone closer to my ear, caught off guard. Wait, what's happening Friday? The dinner party for Brian's promotion, she said, like I should have already known. I frowned and switched the phone to my other ear. I wasn't invited. Of course not, she replied casually. It's mostly Brian's colleagues and friends. You wouldn't really fit in. Her words stung, but I kept my voice calm. But you still want me to come and set the table? Exactly, she said, as if I had just figured out a puzzle. You're great at these things, Audrey. You always have an eye for detail. And don't worry about staying long, just help set up. We'll handle the rest. I closed my eyes, letting her words sink in. Once again, I wasn't important enough to be a guest, but they still needed me to do the work. My name is Audrey, and in my family, I'm just a reliable extra one they call when they need something done. They don't include me, but they count on me to make things perfect for Brian's endless achievements. I've been overlooked for years, but somehow, it still hurt every time. Fine, I finally said, keeping my voice steady. What time do you need me there? 4:00 sharp, my mom said happily. We need time to set the table, light the candles, and plate the appetizers. Oh, and could you bring some extra napkins? We might run out. Sure, I replied, forcing a tight smile she couldn't see. Thanks, Audrey. You're a lifesaver, she said, hanging up before I could even say goodbye. I set my phone down and stared out the window of my tiny apartment, frustration growing. I had moved out to get away from this exact situation, but no matter how far I went, nothing changed. Just then, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was from a reservation app I hadn't used in months, suggesting a table for one at my favorite restaurant on Friday night. I hovered my finger over the screen for a moment, then tapped reserve. For once, they could figure it out without me. By Thursday, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Don't forget to pick up the extra napkins, my mom texted. Brian's boss is bringing his wife, so make sure the table settings are perfect. Another message read. Each text made me grip my phone tighter. They hadn't even asked if I could help, he just assumed I would, like always. But not this time. I glanced at the confirmation email for my reservation. A tiny part of me felt guilty. Was it wrong to leave them hanging? Then I thought about all the times I had dropped everything for Thimley to be ignored, dismissed, or left out. This wasn't just about Friday. It was about years of being taken for granted. No. This time, they could figure it out on their own. On Friday morning, my mom called. Audrey, just a quick reminder, appear by 4, she said cheerfully. We're counting on you. I paused for a moment, then said, Don't worry, man, I'll take care of it. Oh, good, she sighed in relief. I don't know what we'd do without you. Yeah, I said quietly. I know. As the day went on, I got ready for their dinner party. Before my own plans, I put on my favorite dress, did my makeup, and grabbed my purse, feeling nervous but excited. When I stepped outside, locking my apartment door behind me, I felt lighter than I had in years. For once, I wasn't putting their needs above my own. By 7:30, I was sitting at my favorite table, a glass of wine in hand, smiling. Let them figure it out, I thought, taking a sip. Tonight, they're on their own. As I settled into my seat, the world outside faded away. The soft murmur of conversation, the clinking of glasses, the warm candlelight felt peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in years. A waiter approached with a smile. Good evening, ready to order? Not yet, I said, but I'll start with a glass of red. He nodded and walked away, leaving me to enjoy the moment. Meanwhile, back at my parents' house, I could only imagine the chaos. My mom pacing the kitchen, wondering where I was, my dad trying to calm her down, Brian assuming I had flaked because in his mind, I was the unreliable one. I thought about the moment they'd realize I wasn't coming. My phone buzzed in my purse, but I ignored it. I already knew the messages waiting for me. Where are you, Audrey? The guests will be here any minute. Why aren't you answering? I almost felt bad for them. Almost. When the waiter returned, I ordered a dish I had always wanted to try. When it arrived, beautifully plated and steaming hot, I smiled. This is what freedom feels like, I thought. No running errands, no setting tables, no family demands. Just me. By the time dessert arrived, a rich, creamy tiramisu was completely at ease. Let them scramble. Maybe, just maybe, they realized how much they had taken me for granted. But for now, that wasn't my problem. Back at my parents' house, this scene was exactly what I had imagined. And probably even worse. "Where is she?" my mom asked, pacing the kitchen. Her voice was sharp, like it always got when things weren't going as planned. "She said she'd be here," my dad said, trying to sound calm but unsure. "Maybe she's running late." "Running late," my mom snapped, throwing her hands up. It's not like Audrey has anything else to do. She knew how important tonight was. How could she just disappear? Brian walked in, adjusting his tie. "Honestly, I don't know why you keep relying on her. She's always being flaky," my dad finished, raising an eyebrow. "She does everything for this family. She probably just lost track of time." Lost track of time? My mom's voice got louder. "She was supposed to be here an hour ago. The table's not set. The candles aren't lit. And the appetizers are still in the fridge. What am I supposed to tell our guests when they arrive and everything's a mess?" Brian shrugged and pulled out his phone. "Not my problem. Maybe next time. Don't depend on someone who—" "Enough," my dad shouted, cutting him off. Meanwhile, I was enjoying my dessert at the restaurant, unaware of the chaos. The tiramisu was delicious as I took another bite, savoring the flavors. Across the room, a couple was laughing, celebrating their anniversary. It felt good to be here, surrounded by warmth and happiness, instead of at home, where my efforts would have gone unnoticed. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't look at it. Tonight, their problems weren't mine to fix. At the house, the stress was building. My mom finally called me, but it went straight to voicemail. "She's ignoring me," she said, staring at the phone in disbelief. Brian snorted. "I told you she was unreliable." My dad sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Let's just focus on getting things ready. Audrey's not here, so we'll figure it out." "Easy for you to say," my mom muttered. "You're not the one who has to explain this mess to the guests." The doorbell rang, and the first guests arrived, walking into a house that was far from ready. My mom put on a fake smile, but I could tell she was furious inside. I imagined her looking around the unfinished dining room, seeing the unlit candles and untouched appetizers, silently blaming me. For the first time, I didn't care. As the evening went on, I took my time, enjoying every moment at the restaurant. The waiter refilled my glass when I decided to check my phone. There were many missed calls and texts. "Where are you? Guests are arriving. Everything's falling apart. We need you now. You're being so selfish, Audrey." I smirked, setting the phone down without replying. For years, I had always dropped everything to help them. Tonight, they could manage without me. At the house, things had spiraled. The table was set, but it wasn't perfect. The silverware didn't match. The tablecloth was wrinkled, and the candles were still unlit. "Why aren't the appetizers out yet?" my mom snapped at my dad, who was struggling with a bottle of wine. "I'm doing the best I can," he replied, frustrated. "You said you'd handle the appetizers." "I said Audrey would handle it." My mom's voice was sharp. "But she's not here, is she?" Brian, sitting at the head of the table, rolled his eyes. "Calm down. No one's going to care about the tablecloth or whatever. Can't we just eat?" "Brian, this is your dinner party," my mom said, angry. "You could at least pretend to care about the details." One of Brian's friends muttered under his breath, "Maybe you should have invited someone who knows how to throw a party." My mom's face went red, and I could see she was about to explode. Meanwhile, I was enjoying a slice of cheesecake, feeling completely at peace. Across the room, a couple was talking about their travels, and it made me think maybe it was time to travel and experience more of life outside of my family's narrow world. As the dinner went on, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from my dad. "We're sorry, Audrey, we shouldn't have assumed you'd handle everything. Can we talk later? I read the message twice, feeling a mix of satisfaction and relief. For the first time, they seemed to realize they had taken me for granted. But tonight wasn't about them, it was about me. I turned my phone off and signaled for the check. By the time I left, the air outside felt calm and peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos at home. I walked to my car, feeling lighter than I had in years. Tonight, I had chosen myself, and it felt amazing. When I started the car, my phone buzzed again. It was another message from my dad. Dinner's over. Mom's furious, but I think she understands now. Can't we talk tomorrow? I sighed and put the phone down without responding. Tonight wasn't about fixing things with him. It was about showing myself that I didn't have to live under their control anymore. Back at the house, the aftermath of my absence was in full swing. Guests had left early, the kitchen was a mess, and the tablecloth was wrinkled and stained. Brian was on his phone in the living room, while my mom was glaring at the mess in the kitchen. This wouldn't have happened if Audrey had been here, she muttered, slamming a plate into the sink. Maybe, my dad said slowly, maybe we shouldn't have expected her to handle everything. What do you mean? My mom asked, narrowing her eyes. It means Audrey has done more for this family than we've ever appreciated, he said, and maybe it's time we start showing her some respect. My mom didn't argue. She seemed to soften just a little. When I got home, the text stopped. I slipped off my shoes, poured a glass of water, and sank into the couch. It felt peaceful. The night wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I had set a boundary, and it felt like the beginning of something better. I thought about my dad's message and maybe calling him tomorrow, but for now, I was content to let them sit with the realization of what it's like without me doing everything. Let them figure it out. The next morning, I woke up feeling calm. No texts or calls waiting for method in itself felt like a small win. I made coffee and Saturday by the window, enjoying the quiet. It felt good, peaceful. By mid-morning, my phone buzzed. It was a call from my dad. I hesitated before answering the phone. Hi, Dad. Hey, Audrey, he said, his voice softer than usual. Do you have a minute? Sure, I replied, trying to keep my tone even. I just wanted to apologize, he began. Last night, we shouldn't have assumed you drop everything to help. That wasn't fair to you. I was caught off guard. My dad didn't usually admit when he was wrong, especially when it came to family matters. It's okay, Dad, I said, though my voice wavered slightly. I've just been feeling invisible lately, like I'm only valued for what I can't do for everyone else. I know, he sighed, sounding tired. Your mom and I talked about it after the guests left. We realized how much we've come to rely on you without ever really acknowledging what you've done. That means a lot to hear, I said, a mix of relief and emotion washing over me. We talked for a few more minutes, and though it wasn't a perfect resolution, it felt like progress. Later, Amanda came over to check in. She had been my sounding board for years, always there with a glass of wine and advice when things got tough. So, she said, dropping onto my couch dramatically, how'd it go? Did the dinner party fall apart without you? Pretty much, I replied with a smirk, but the real surprised me that Ashley apologized. Her eyes widened. No way, that's unexpected. Tell me about it, I said, shaking my head. I think they finally realized how much they've taken me for granted. Well, it's about time, Amanda said, raising an imaginary glass, a toast to Audrey, the unsung hero. As the day went on, I found myself thinking more about my dad's apology. It wasn't everything, but it was a step forward. Later that evening, I decided to text him. Thanks for the call, Dad. It meant a lot. Let's talk more soon. He replied quickly. Anytime. We owe you more than an apology. It wasn't much, but it felt like a turning point, a small but meaningful shift in the way my family saw me. That night, I curled up on the couch with a book, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. For once, I wasn't carrying the weight of their expectations, and it felt freeing. Maybe things were changing, maybe they weren't, but either way, I knew one thing for sure. I never let myself fade into the background again. The following week, I decided it was time to have a proper conversation with my mom. My dad's apology had been a good start, but I knew she was the one who really needed to hear me. I caught her on a quiet afternoon. She picked up after the second ring, her voice as brisk as always. "Audrey, I wasn't expecting you to call. Everything okay?" "Yes, ma'am," I said evenly, "but I think we need to talk." There was a pause. "About Friday?" "Among other things," I replied. We met for coffee at a small cafe near her house. She arrived looking slightly defensive, her posture stiff as she sat her day across from me. "Your father said you were upset," she began, skipping any pleasantries. "I wasn't just upset," I said, cutting straight to the point. "I was hurt, ma'am. I've spent years doing everything for this family, helping at events, cleaning up messes, running errands, and it's like none of it even matters unless it benefits Brian." She opened her mouth to respond, but I held up a hand. "Let me finish. You didn't even invite me to the dinner. You just expected me to set the table, handle the details, and disappear when the guests arrived. Do you have any idea how that feels?" Her expression softened, and she sighed heavily. "Audrey, it wasn't intentional. We've just always counted on you to help because you're so dependable. You never complain." "That's the problem," I said. "I never complained because I was raised to believe it wasn't my place to. But I'm not just dependable, ma'am. I'm your daughter, and I deserve to be treated like I matter, not just for what I can do, but for who I am." She stared into her coffee, stirring it absent-mindedly. "You're right," she said, finally meeting my eyes. "We've been unfair to you. I didn't realize how much we were asking of you without giving anything back." I nodded, feeling lighter. "I'm not saying I won't help when it's needed, but I'm done being taken for granted. From now on, I'm setting boundaries." The conversation ended on a surprisingly positive note. My mom apologized sincerely, and though I knew change wouldn't happen overnight, I felt a flicker of hope. Over the next few weeks, things started to shift. My parents began including me in more decisions, asking for my input instead of assuming. They didn't always get it right, but it was progress, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was being seen, not just for what I could do, but for who I was. The road ahead wasn't clear, but one thing was certain: I wasn't going back to the way things were. The following days passed in a quiet rhythm of newfound freedom. I wasn't rushing around doing favors or cleaning up after everyone else. I had reclaimed my space, my time, and, most importantly, my sense of self. Each day felt like a small victory, a confirmation that I was worthy of more than just being a background character in my family's life. I'd never realized how much I'd been giving up just to keep the peace, how much of myself I'd sacrificed to fill a role that was never truly mine. This shift was subtle, but it was profound. That evening, I received another text from my mom. "We're planning a family gathering next month. Would you like to come as a guest?" I read the message twice, smiling. It wasn't just an invitation, it was a sign of something different. No expectations, no demands, just an invitation to be a part of something. As a guest, not as the invisible helper who had to shoulder everything. For a moment, I hesitated. Was I ready to go back into that space? Was I ready to test whether the changes were real? But then I realized something. I was no longer the person I was before. I didn't need to prove myself to them or anyone. The only thing I needed to do was be true to myself. "I'd love to. Thanks for asking," I replied. The day of the gathering arrived, and as I walked into my parents' house, I felt a shift in the air. Everything felt different, but in the best way possible. My mom greeted me with a warm hug, genuine and unguarded. For once, there was no rush to get me involved in last-minute preparations, no frantic demand for me to just help with one more thing. "Everything's ready," she said with a smile. "Come in and relax. We're so glad you could make it." As I stepped into the house, I couldn't help but notice how calm everything felt. The table was set up perfectly, but it didn't matter. The smell of roasted chicken and fresh bread filled the air, and I felt a sense of belonging, not as someone who was expected to make everything work, but as a part of the family who was welcome to simply enjoy the moment. My dad was in the kitchen, pulling appetizers from the oven with a laugh, while Brian lounged in the living room, chatting with guests. I was surprised by how comfortable I felt, just being a guest in my own family space. For once, there was no sense of urgency to make everything flawless. It was okay to let things be a little messy. In fact, it felt kind of freeing. The evening passed in a quiet, contented blur. I found myself laughing with my dad over a silly childhood memory, sharing a glass of wine with my mom, and even exchanging a few kind words with Brian. There was no tension, no resentment hanging in the air. The whole gathering felt relaxed, warm, and real. Later, as I helped my mom bring out dessert, she looked at me with a smile that was quieter, but more sincere than any smile she had given me in years. "I'm really glad you came tonight," she said, her voice soft. "It's nice having you here just as you are." The words hit me in a way I wasn't expecting. I had spent so much of my life wondering if I mattered to them, if they ever truly saw me beyond the roles I had to play. But now, I knew they did. It wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was progress, and that, in itself, was enough. "Thanks, Ma'am," I replied, feeling a warmth in my chest I hadn't felt in years. When I left that night, the air was crisp and quiet, a soft reminder of how much had changed. As I drove back to my apartment, I thought about everything journey I had taken to reclaim myself, to set boundaries, to finally be seen for who I truly was. My family wasn't perfect, and they likely never would be, but for the first time, they were seeing me not just as someone to rely on, but as a person in my own right. And for the first time in a long time, I was seeing myself that way, too. I pulled into my parking spot, stepped out of my car, and breathed in the cool night air. There was a sense of quiet confidence in me now, something I had never had before. I'd let go of the need to make everyone else happy at my own expense, and in doing so, I had finally found my own happiness. That night, I curled up on the couch with a book, feeling a peace I hadn't known in years. The version of me who had walked out of the dinner party weeks ago was still there, stronger, more confident, and finally free to live life on her own terms. This was just the beginning, and it felt like the start of something truly beautiful.